Welcome to Chapter 3. We'll be using this image of a landscape to illustrate the concept that a healthy ecosystem equals healthy soil. Now, an ecosystem is a great example of, well, a system. And whenever we think about a system, we should think about all the pieces in this graphic organizer. The system has a boundary where we're only considering one chunk of the world and ignoring everything else. There are inputs and outputs to the system from that outside world, the components inside the system, and interactions. You can see that our diagram of the ecosystem, it has the input energy from the sun, it has water flowing as output downstream, and many individual components. What the image is missing, though, is the interactions, the arrows that illustrate the exchanges of energy and matter between the components of the ecosystem. And these interactions make the system work. And this chapter is all about those interactions. Most notably, how does mass cycle between the different components? In Lesson 9, students first ensure that their worms are taken care of, and then they consider our assertion that a healthy ecosystem equals healthy soil. Today is all about the question, what is an ecosystem? They dissect ecosystems into living, non-living, and energy components. We use a familiar park ecosystem as our example, and students discuss the living components, and they learn to categorize the living components into the levels of consumers, producers, and decomposers. Next, students discuss the energy exchanges in the ecosystem, with an ultimate connection to the sun's input. Then they consider the non-living components. Next lesson, they'll put these components together in an ecosystem model. In the next lesson, students start by checking on their worm farms and plant experiments. Then students develop models of how energy and matter move through the components of an ecosystem. We guide the students through an example first, and then they develop their own models, always thinking about where does the mass go? Finally, students participate in the unit concept checkpoint number 1, which is a formative assessment consisting of multiple choice questions written to probe student misconceptions about the topics that we've learned so far. In Lesson 11, we think back to our bubbling soil test, which revealed the relative amount of organic matter in soil. Well, remember that bubbling? Today we're going to investigate another bubbling process. Note down the combined mass of a tablet and a cup of water before dropping the tablet in. And then after the bubbling, the mass is lower. Where did the mass go? Students use manipulatives to represent individual atoms in the chemical reaction. They count the atoms at different stages to ensure that whatever they start with, they end with, which is a core principle of the cross-cutting concept of energy and matter. But the demonstration showed that mass appeared to go away. So the third part of the day, students must modify their tablet investigation so they can do a better job tracking all the matter. Make students come up with their own ideas, but the basic principle is that they need to close the system so that the carbon dioxide gas doesn't escape. They'll implement their plan next time. In the next lesson, we begin by checking on, caring for, and tracking data for our worm farms and our plants. Students then implement their plan to modify the Seltzer tablet demo so they can properly measure the total mass of the system. Students will turn in the Proving the Law of Conservation of Matter handout at the end of the class period, so today's mostly a work day. They continue to develop their model of atoms and molecules to explain where the mass went and to express their idea as a claim backed by evidence and reasoning. In Lesson 13, students wrap up the discussion of conservation of matter, specifically thinking about the chemical reactions in the decomposition of organic matter. Then students spend the rest of the period revising their ecosystem models. They want to make sure that their model includes soil and helps illustrate the role that soil plays in the ecosystem. Students refer to the ecosystem model rubric before they get a clean paper to make a final version of their model to turn in. While we're waiting for changes in the soil to cause changes in our plants in our experiment, next up, we're going to see how soil forms the foundation of our entire ecosystem.